Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health webinar series. People are going to start slowly rolling in, but we wanted to get started. Thank you for joining us today, and the topic is Thriving in Action from There to Here to Next, the story of a Ryerson resilience intervention. So just a couple of housekeeping details before we get started. Participants are on mute while we are on the call. So if you have any questions or comments as the presentation is rolling, feel free to use the question or chat function on the menu, and you can type in whatever questions you have, and we'll start taking up those questions around 1:45 or so. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website. The presentation slides are also available to download. So if you click under the handout function, you're going to see a PDF version of the slides that you can use to follow along or use later on for your own reference. This is all the presentation slides, and the recording is all going to go out in a follow-up email tomorrow, so don't worry about that. We do also have a short survey at the end of the webinar, so please take a few minutes to complete, as the feedback is very valuable to us. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. My name is Perlin Ng. I am the Research and Knowledge Exchange Coordinator for the Center, and we are joined today by Dina and Diana from Ryerson. Thank you for joining us today.
It's wonderful to be here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Diana Breacher. I'm the Scholar in Residence for Positive Psychology at Ryerson. I'm also a clinical psychologist and co-founder of the Thriving in Action program that we'll be talking to you about today.
I'm Dr. Dina Kerr-Schaefer. I'm the Coordinator of Student Transitions and Retention in Ryerson Student Affairs, where I've been for the past 2 years, and prior I was the Learning Specialist at our Disability Services Office here at Ryerson. I'm really excited. Nice to see everybody.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the agenda for today. We're going to start off with just really placing Thriving in Action within the Thrive RU Resilience Initiative on campus. We'll be talking about the program itself, the curriculum, research, some student voices. We're going to introduce our Thriving in Action, which we refer to as TIA, online, which is still in development, and our resources. So I'd like to describe to you, based on my work as a counselor in the Counseling Center at Ryerson for 25 years and as the director for much of that time, I thought about what would be the profile of a student who's truly struggling. And so there are 5 characteristics. One is they find it very difficult to be in the present moment. They tend to be unaware of good things that are happening in their lives. They tend to have a pessimistic explanatory style. They tend to be very self-critical, and they tend to give up when feeling overwhelmed. So when I wanted to develop a model of resilience, I tried to address each of those 5 characteristics with a remedy of some sort. So it's resilience with mindfulness at the heart of it, gratitude to address noticing the good things that are happening in your life, optimism, that's pretty self-explanatory, cultivating a sense of self-compassion in order to counteract the self-criticism, and developing a personal model of resilience when they are feeling overwhelmed. And so out of that, I created a resilience training program, which I've now run on campus with hundreds of students, faculty, and staff, where I teach mindfulness and gratitude in the first session, optimism, self-compassion, and include mindfulness as well in the 3rd session. And then the 4th session is grit and a personal model of resilience. So this is really what underpins the Thriving curriculum in the Thriving in Action program. This is a drawing that was done when I gave a 1-hour talk at a conference. And in all of these, what you see here is really all the elements of the resilience training program at Ryerson, including those 5 factors, mindfulness, etc.
And, you know, Diana's 5-factor model of resilience is so compelling that it inspired me as a kind of constraint to cohere what I believe around resilience-based learning, or a resilience-based approach to learning strategies. And so in my own practice and the pedagogy that I believe in, I noticed that practicability, a belief, showing students that these are learnable skills, that even if they don't feel expertly or confident yet, What happens if we lay bare the necessary skills to do university or of how to learn, and over practice can become more confident? Restoring attention, the number of students that would describe feeling fragmented in their focus, so bringing attentiveness back. Well-being and being well, so that is to indicate that students don't have to wait until the weekend or the holidays to tend to their well-being and sense of health, but instead can not only coexist, but well-being can be a precursor to academic performance. Connectedness is also part of the model that I'd like to share, and that's connectedness to one's own self, one's own body, connectedness to others, so the social, the sense of relationship and rapport, connectedness to the larger campus, connectedness to the meaning and purpose in one's chosen field of study. Another way of calling connectedness is belongingness. And lastly, I sometimes refer to this as wide awakeness, which comes from Maxine Greene, or alertness, or being intentional or deliberate, remembering one's agency or decision making to put into action what one wants, what one envisions about their education, instead of letting it happen passively. And so that was my experience working one-on-one and in small groups with students. And wouldn't you know, this was really driven home. Last week, research came out from University of Waterloo, York, Western, University of Scarborough, and University of Toronto Mississauga campus, that when they surveyed humanities and social sciences students, they found what they call deficits. It's a harsh word, but lacking competencies or skills. And you can see just how high the number of students are that are either at risk or outright failing. And why we show this to you from the start is it really validates why the learning skills piece has been married to the thriving skills or positive psychology skills piece that Diana teaches, is that this is also where students live. They're in lectures, they're doing readings, they're solving problems, they're working on portfolios. And so being able to teach them those skills alongside the fundamental thriving skills of an optimistic explanatory style or self-compassion, that the marriage is what makes thriving in action so resonant with our students. So this is exactly what we've done. Thriving in action is positive psychology plus resilience-based learning strategies as an intervention. And just as a little shout out to a side program, part of the Thrive RU larger umbrella initiative, that Diana and I actually created Thriving in Action on a mood route. We don't often share that story in the institutes. We run our presentations, but it is a special part of our journey here that Diana and I went for a walk, a stroll, a nearby green space, and it was on that walk where we realized, wow, you know, Diana's 25 plus years as a senior psychologist and coordinator at a counseling center, working with students in distress, and this desire and expertise to meet students further upstream and intervene. My own work as a learning specialist in our disability services office, and prior as a high school teacher, and really thinking creatively around the strategies that would be longer lasting and less transactional. And that on a mood route, our green space walking program that was born out of the Canadian Mental Health Association's Mood Walks program, it was on a mood route where we created or hashed out Thriving in Action.
So I want to talk a little bit about what do we teach. So Dana's going to be scrolling through. Initially, I teach essentially the basics of resilience, so mindfulness, gratitude, optimism, self-compassion, and grit. And then growth mindset is both taught implicitly and explicitly. We talk about intentionality and being deliberate in our strategies. We're really interested in agency and the capacity of our students to engage in self-efficacy, and our research question is really linked to that self-efficacy. Self-advocacy, and can you advocate for yourself on campus? Learning to self-regulate, which is another way of saying, can you manage your emotions? And mindful time management is also about managing yourself. Learning how to take good and effective notes in session, attentive and appreciative listening in class and lectures and group programs, how to restore your focus, be it to study or to be in friendship, being efficient with your studying so you have time to play, learning how to take tests in such a way that you actually walk in with a bit of a swagger. That's quoting Dina. Learning how to write an essay, and really good tips and strategies about how to do that. We teach flow, the optimal performance, and what are the conditions that you can bring into your life to bring that about. How to be a human being in collaborative group work, which actually greases the wheels so that everything that you produce together is also produced as a team. So it's really learning how to build teams. Engaging in your curiosity, both as a character strength and as a real skill associated with being a student. Cultivating a sense of wonder and awe. When do we stop and notice those things? What are micro-resilience interventions, and how can you use them day to day, moment to moment, when you really need it the most? Sleep is a strategy that is both a learning strategy and a thriving strategy, and we teach it in the context of how to create good habits. Using our breath as a way of managing self-regulation and managing emotions, how to manage that school work-life balance. Using movement as part of our weekly class to teach people mindful movements as a learning strategy and as a thriving strategy. And so every session has the same rhythm, and the students know it, so they can actually plan for it. We start off by asking each student to reflect on what they learned the week before. So this isn't session 1, it starts at session 2. What went well is really based on Seligman's work, the 3 good things exercise, which will many of you may be familiar with. But what we do is we get everyone to talk about something that went well, and that's the focus. Then I teach a thriving skill based on the curriculum, which we'll be showing you. Then we have a reflective writing prompt, which gives them time out in a way, but to engage in another level. Then we teach mindful movement. There's a visualization meditation, then a learning strategy. Then we focus on some breath work. And then there's a 3-minute calming breath meditation. And then one of the resources that I've created in the Thrive RU program is the Cultivate Your Happiness workbook. So we assign homework from that workbook each week. We don't follow up to find out if they've done it, but they often come back in and say, oh, I tried this exercise and this was what went well.
So who is Thriving in Action for? And how is it implemented? So Thriving in Action is a semester-long, non-credit as yet, although we're in the moves towards having it be an open elective, intervention. Now, we start on the 3rd week in the semester on purpose to scoop students who are beginning to realize or experience that things aren't going so well. And it is, as Diane has described, it's a curricular blend of positive psychology essentials. So some of those are gratitude or learned optimism, creating new habits. And those are braided with holistic and resilience-based learning strategies. So again, things like mindfulness-based time management instead of, say, hypervigilant study schedules, collaborative group work to disrupt sometimes how students really detest group work. And who, it's for those in their early undergraduate years. And by that, we mean the 2nd semester of their 1st year. Now, we have had students come from the 1st semester of their 1st year, but really if they've transferred from the college system or they're mature students, we find that students need at least 1 semester of post-secondary to really know what they need and to acclimate fully to what post-secondary demands are. So it's most effective, Thriving in Action, from the 2nd semester of the 1st year through all of those middle years, which we often call the messy middle, through their 6th, 7th, or 8th years of undergrad, and through even master's and doctorate level. And we have indeed had a couple of doctorate students, including one who is the TA for another student, and it worked just fine, and master's level, of course. Now, it's for students in all disciplines, whether they're a continuing education student, whether in engineering, midwifery, dance, all social sciences and humanities, all disciplines, all ages. We are in fact very mature, student friendly, all life circumstances. So we have very part-time students who are working full-time, caregiving full-time, parenting full-time, as well as those who are in their second year, 5 courses a semester. What coheres this very heterogeneous group is a sense of self-identifying as not doing very well. So Thriving in Action is intended and does serve underreached students, those who are underrepresented and those who are minoritized. And so what we mean by that are students who have been triaged, say from the counseling center, to be doing okay, they're not in distress, but they are waiting to get an appointment, sometimes for months. So how can we build their skills while they're waiting? What about injured athletes or mature students who are returning after school, have years or decades even of not being in a school program? Students who are navigating disabilities, students who are racialized, Indigenous students, students who are first generation. We welcome all students. Particularly those students who would benefit from having explicit, transparent, how to do school laid bare. So whether or not those explicit skills were taught in their families or prior schooling, or whether there's been disrupted schooling, we're there to, without any kind of condescension or patronizing, here's some approaches that you can choose from. Diana calls it a buffet, the skills we offer a buffet that students can identify what is most relevant and appropriate. And in this way, we are teaching something that is progressive, innovative, rich in neuroscience and evidence-based, and very much a whole person approach that has social justice as a key pillar. Thriving in Action, interestingly, is also what we like to think of as a reorientation program or a post-orientation program. And in this way, we really honor and admire all of the orientation programming, you know, that week prior to first year, the first 6 weeks. And really, Thriving in Action is an answer to the question, and then what? So what happens when things aren't going very well after your first midterm or your first year or in your 4th year, and there's a bit of that waking up going, wow, I really feel disoriented. It is also a transition program because we honor the many types of transitions that students face. So from course to course, from semester to semester, changing their discipline, the program, the relationships that change year to year, again, back to that messy middle. And just, you know, we want to make sure through this webinar to give as many resources for you to walk away with as possible. And Diana will be talking at the end about some of the resources she's created, like that happiness workbook. Another one is Passages. So right away, there's a curricular intervention, a provocation that you can use called Passages Film, or the website's Passages Film that you can check out. And it's to make visual the transitory nature of post-secondary. Thriving in Action is also an early alert program and a retention program.
So as we teach Thriving in Action, we often come up with what we call the alternate title or subtitle of the course. Sometimes with just the insight in the moment, like living an intentional life is really describes the curriculum probably as well as anything else. Or the agency project, building belongingness, improving inner resourcefulness, bouncing forward. And the latest is learning to pendulate, which is really about this idea of how our nervous system always goes back and forth between rest and being stressed, is one way to think about it, is how do we navigate that transition and bring ourselves back as a micro-resilience strategy to that rest point so that we can then bounce forward as we need to. I also want to talk about what's like the best of TIA. So we have a really broad curriculum. And when we thought about what we think resonates most deeply with our students, this is not an exhaustive list, and none of this is an exhaustive list, but here's the beginning. So session 1, we teach how to create new habits based on the work of Charles Duhigg and also Sean Acor. But what we've done now is we also teach them about sleep and sleep hygiene and creating a buffer zone before you go to sleep, and how do you do it in such a way that you actually treat it as a learning strategy. We teach them about your character strengths and how to lead from those strengths. How do you transfer the resilience that you have when you're doing something you love into another context? about self-compassion and being your own best friend, taking charge of your planning and your time management, using things like an assignment calculator and chunking your work. This is often news to our students. They had never considered doing it until we actually teach it to them. How to be an efficient studier, how to swagger into an exam. What does it mean? We do a lot of group work at Ryerson with our students. What does it mean to work peacefully and productively rather than have it as something that you just endure until you can get out of it when it's done? What are the importance, or what is the importance of mindful movement and meditation as a break from studying and a break from emotionally charged situations? So those are like really micro-resilience strategies interspersed through the day. Practicing gratitude and noticing what went well is something that boosts your mood and energy and also boosts your focus as a student. So we want to tell you a bit about our research. This is preliminary. We haven't collected all of our data because we just finished in about a month ago, and we're about to analyze the full cohort of the past 2 years. But we will be telling you about the research to date.
So we have run, since our pilot 2 years ago, we have run 10 cohorts, and we wanted to really explore what has felt very clear in the room. And when students describe the tremendous impact on their well-being, on their relationships, on their GPA. And so we are formally exploring, we have ethics approval and have collected all the data and are underway in our analysis. And we're exploring the question, in what ways does thriving in action cultivate self-efficacy in our students? And the reason we went with that was because it allowed us to step back from the buffet of specific skills that students are trying from the broad list that Diana has described, so that they can pick and choose and combine and refine and tailor in ways that are most appropriate for their lives and their needs. And to answer that question or explore it, we are taking a mixed methods approach. So we're using the OQ45, the Mental Health Vital Signs Pre and Post Questionnaire, and that is taking a snapshot of how are students doing in this moment. It also is part of the early alert system that we described, insofar as when students have high scores on that, Diana is able to very quickly refer them into counseling, because thriving in action isn't therapy and isn't a replacement for important counseling work, although it can coexist with that and offers therapeutic benefits. We use the thriving quotient because that is really appropriate for the post-secondary context. It's asking students about their resilience, their grittiness, their sense of belongingness and connection. We're using the general self-efficacy scale, and we're doing a narrative inquiry analysis into the tape-recorded starts of every session, which is the what went well, or the 3 good things from Seligman. And just to say about what went well, what's so poignant we hear from students is that it's often the first time they've ever been asked that, or it's the only time in their day. Because so often if they ask their friends, or their friends ask them, or their family asks them, how's it going? Their answers are, I'm busy, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm stressed. And so to be challenged to look, not to rose-colored glasses, anything, but even if it's small, like I got out of bed, or I came here, sometimes it's huge, I got my first A. And so those transcripts are part of our research as well.
So we're going to tell you about some of the research that we've done so far. So the Thriving Quotient has a whole set of questions about life on campus for post-secondary students. And this first one is, even if assignments are not interesting to me, I find a way to keep working at them until they're done well. So at pre-test, 67% of our students endorsed that. And at post-test, 96% did. Agency, again, this is so much an agency project. So I know how to apply my strengths to achieve academic success. 45% could endorse that at pre-test, which we do before session 1. And 93% endorsed this at post-test, which is after the last session at the end of term. Belonging. I feel like I belong here went from 56 to 93%, which we're delighted by, because we know that retention on campus is so linked to a sense of belonging with peers, having a sense of belonging in your program, somewhere on campus, be it a librarian or a departmental assistant or anyone in between. That sense that you belong is critical to your success. Optimism, again, you know, we're very interested in that because it's such a key aspect of thriving. I was just chatting with one of the originators of the Thriving Quotient questionnaire, who told me that the best predictor for a high score of Thriving Quotient at the end of term is the degree of hope you demonstrate early on. And so 65% endorsed this at pre-test and 88% at post-test. Now, moving on to the OQ45, which, as Dina mentioned, is really a measure that's often used in a clinical setting week by week. What we've done it as before they start and right after the end. At pre-test, 60% were scoring between moderately high and high distress. And in some cases, the level of distress that they were experiencing, which is part of our early alert system, was consistent with those who are in an inpatient psychiatric ward, like that level of distress. At post-test, it dropped down to 11% who were in the moderate to high distress, and 89 who were low to moderate, which we were, again, delighted by.
So this is from an email that a student sent us. I'm so glad I took part in TIA today. I woke up feeling unmotivated, like it was a weird day, but left the session with a sense of uplift and open-heartedness, ready to face the day. I couldn't even think of something for what went well at the beginning. However, with Diana's advice to open up our hearts to finding the little things, noticing things to be grateful for, my outlook on the day began to change. With the writing prompt, I let out my thoughts and even wrote out what I wanted to get done with some affirmation. Then came mindful movement, we call that circle of joy, which actually really helped by kind of waking up my body and giving it some love through stretches, something it really needs. And when Dina began to talk about walking into an exam with confidence, sass, and swagger, I was so excited and already yearning to feel that. I really love that she was yearning to go into an exam. That makes that delight to me. This session was full of reflection, but also the feeling that I think I'm ready to take charge. You can hear the self-efficacy in that, and strive to have this feeling starting with today. Thanks for everything you both do. It really makes such a difference. Now, we're going to show you what we're calling an artifact. So at the final session, in addition to what went well, we also ask students to create some kind of artifact. It can be visual, it can be an item brought in, it can be something that is written, a story that is shared, and we've had the full range, but an artifact that exemplifies the pre-thriving in action to post-thriving in action change. Small or big, did anything shift? For some, it's small. For many, they would use the word transformative. And so we wanted to share you this one, a graphic that a student made. So it's dark, but you can see a student sitting in a figure sitting in the lotus position with a sort of heart burst, light burst out of their heart region. Before thriving in action, she writes, I found myself in darkness. I was filled with anxiety. I always felt nervous, and I felt scared to be a failure. I joined TIA in hopes that I'll be able to help better myself. During thriving in action, I learned new methods. I gained courage and learned a lot about myself. Thriving in action has helped me find the light within myself. In the illustration, you can see I'm still sitting in darkness, but I think of TIA as the Kickstarter and foundation to bringing light to my life, and I will carry the tips and advice they have taught me forever. Now, just to highlight a couple of things in that, still sitting in darkness, we're really careful. We know that adversity is going to still be present, that to be alive means both joy and discomfort and sorrow and barriers. And what we're trying to do is to offer as many different skills. Think of micro-resilience just for a moment. What can students do to intervene on their own behalf? And this last part, I'll carry the tips and advice you've taught me forever. Many, if not all, of the skills we're teaching them are transferable or transition skills into their future later pursuits, whether it is internship, employment, or graduate study. And we often are making the explicit link to employability skills later.
So this is another artifact that a student produced at the end of the session. And it was triggered by an email exchange that I had with this student. And I had said something to him along the lines of, I'm so glad that this program or this material was such a catalyst for you. Now, this student was a biochemistry student, and so he took the meaning of catalyst to be more than just how I was using it in conversation. And so this is life versus life with Tia. Thriving in action is a catalyst for change. And so the little orange figure with that very sad expression on his face is the energy required without Tia to reach his goals. But if you add Tia into the mix, into that biochemical change, all of a sudden there's much more energy, much less energy expended to reach the same goal. So it's not that his goals have changed, it's just he doesn't cost so much. And so Dina and I have decided that when we write our book, this is going to be the cover.
And because of how really potently Thriving in Action has landed for our students, there have been a number of very organic ripples. So first is that because students felt so connected to the program and to each other, they, with our guidance, created a peer-to-peer program. And so what that looks like is once a week, Thriving in Action drop-in is led by Thriving in Action alumni, and that's where students can ask each other, you know, so how are you using Diana's 6 optimism questions? And how are you using Dina's various approaches to note-taking? It's where students can really honestly begin to unpack and explore how to implement what's working well for them or not, and learn from each other's expertise. We also had one student lead community art making activities. And so we did things like Ikigai, those Venn diagrams about life purpose, and a whole bunch of other really fun, very accessible, entry-level creative activities. And this was just a way to keep the Thriving in Action alumni community together at their request. We've also had several nature and movement ripples or side projects. So one I've mentioned, Mood Roots. Now, Mood Roots pre-existed Thriving in Action. It was, again, from the CMHA's Mood Walks program that's now at over 20 post-secondary institutions across Ontario. Beautiful to hear. But Mood Roots has also wound up being a way for Thriving in Action students to stay connected with each other, to practice the strategies that we talk about, including how time and nature elevates our ability to focus and decreases sort of physiological stress. Portage is our paddling program, so another kind of reorientation program. Now we take students who have gone through the Thriving in Action program, we invite them on a 5-day paddling trip to Algonquin Park, and we do that the 5 days before the new semester begins. So we're hoping to do that August 2019 again. And why do we do that? Because we know about nature as a site of long-lasting learning skills. Things like resilience and grit and collaborative communication, attention restoration. We also had a kayaking program that was run from our athletics center, and what has been really strong and continues is Fundamentals and Feel Good Fridays our 2 private group fitness classes that were run for Thriving in Action students only at no cost to them, those through our very good friends at our athletics center, so Andrew Pettit and the community there, because students can practice what it means to remember they have a body, all that we know about exercise and improved cognition, stress reduction, and the host of other benefits. We have also run 5 training institutes. Some of you may have attended that. So we've had 2 here at Ryerson, 1 at Caucus, and then 2 where we were privately asked to come up to both Centennial and Seneca. And there we're offering large groups how to implement Thriving in Action in their own institutions, in their own way. So we offer very thorough curriculum and resources, but also with the understanding that each institution has a different culture, different populations of students, and it really matters to tailor Thriving in Action to what is most fitting for your students. We have a national community of practice of over 50 members, and if any of you are interested, please feel free to email us. We'll share our contact information at the end. And right now, we have Thriving in Action implemented or infused at more than 10 post-secondary institutions across Canada. Very, very exciting. Why? Because we have a shared hunger to boost the resilience of our students and to do this work upstream and to offer learnable skills.
So I wanted to also tell you a bit about a resource that's available to you whether or not you implement Thriving in Action in your post-secondary institution. So there's a Thrive RU website, which is up on the screen, and on it are all kinds of kind of open source resources that are available to you. So we've mentioned this Cultivate Your Happiness workbook. This is a downloadable PDF. It's organized for students 13 weeks for the fall and the winter term. Each week there's a different exercise that I've chosen based on really my 25 years in the Counseling Center and observing what typical challenges happen at what stage of each term. So there's 13 themes repeated for fall and winter. Students can, you can order a print copy or you can download it off the website with no cost to you whatsoever, and we encourage people to tap into that. I've also created a facilitator resource manual for that. So for staff who want to run these exercises perhaps in small groups, or they want to know more about the background behind each exercise, I have references in there, the reason why I chose it for that time of year, etc. I've also created a 4 seasons workbook. So this is for faculty and staff, and it goes for the 12 months of the year. So there's 52 exercises. All of the meditations that we teach our students in Thriving in Action are also audio recorded on the website. And kind of separate to that on this website is all the other stuff I'm doing outside of Thriving in Action that is Thrive RU related, the resilience training program I run. I've also been working with one of our librarians, Anne Lovebrook, to create a mental health collection. So basically, when I read a book that I think other people would be interested in that relates to either positive psychology or anything related to thriving that I think would be helpful, there's a mental health collection that you can click on as the Thrive RU is the bottom item on the left-hand side, but above it is a collection that I worked with a graduate student on for all other related topics for kind of personal mental health. So it's just a resource that anyone can tap in. It's an annotated bibliography, and you would have to purchase or get these books elsewhere, but at least the titles are there. We also have TED Talks and other types of video that are very helpful. I wanted to mention here, just before we launch into the online, that I have to leave the webinar early today, probably in the next minute or so. So we're about to wrap up our content. Dina will stay with you and talk about our online program, and then take all of your questions. And I just wanted to let you know that it's been a pleasure being here, and all the best. Thanks.
Thanks, Diana. Okay, let's keep going. So one of the things we're most excited to share today is that Thriving in Action is soon going to be launched in an online version as well. Always in the back of our mind is how can we reach as many students as possible, and how can students who miss a session or want to revisit a session, how can they loop back to the material. We also want to serve faculty who want to incorporate Thriving in Action materials into their work with students. And so what we've done is we are nearing the end of the content. We're about 2 days away. And we're hoping to launch it, beta test it over the summer and launch either in September or in January 2020. And so the starting question for us of Thriving in Action is, how can I learn to love being a student? What we realized creating this really robust online initiative is that we can't recreate the in-person, very relational experience with students. So instead, we had to fuse and then explode wide open all of what Diana and I hope to share with our students. And so our starting question is this: how can I learn to love being a student? And our teachings are offered through 12 dispositions or states or qualities of being a student. And so here's what we're suggesting. Again, not exhaustive, but as a beautiful, almost poetic constraint to what students can practice. They can practice appreciativeness, attentiveness, connectedness, deliberateness, determinedness, healthfulness, joyfulness, meaningfulness, open-heartedness, presentness, resourcefulness, and skillfulness. And in each of these are anywhere from 15 to 20 lessons, activities, engagements, provocations, videos, research that follow a flow and also can be used as individual morsels. We are really, really excited about this. It's been a 2-year labor, and we're also offering it in written so that it's for all audiences, whether you're a student, whether you're staff, parent who wants to take a look at it, or faculty. So to begin to close Thriving in Action, and hopefully you have a pretty good sense of what Diana and I have been up to. So we have one student who writes, "I need to thank you for the group and how much it has become a highlight of my week. Thriving in Action has helped accelerate the fumbling process of de-languishing I've been going through for years, and I'm better for having joined. I've spent my whole life pinned by some internal gravity, and I'm pleased to feel a fair bit lighter, thanks to your encouragement and insight." We love that, fair bit lighter. So if you find yourself after today interested, certainly right away, please make use of Diana's resources that she's created at the ryerson.ca/thriveru site. The beautiful film made by John Hanna and Van Wickham and Tesney Ellis, Passages. But if you're interested to learn more, if you're interested to see how this might fit at your post-secondary institution, or if there are any secondary teachers as well, or organizations, you know, we teach a Thriving in Action Training Institute a couple times a year. And so to learn how to teach the TIA curriculum, the logistics of rolling it out, we cover all of those questions of how do we recruit, if there are any inclusion and exclusion criteria, who the key stakeholders have been, how much it costs. The answer to that is very little. What is sufficient expertise to teach it? All of those questions and all others of how to implement Thriving in Action, we offered a training institute, and at a minimum, we'll offer one in December here at Ryerson, and we're also open, if there are large enough groups across Canada, we can come potentially and train on site. And also to meet others who are also implementing or keen to implement. And at that, if you're interested, as I mentioned, to join our Community of Practice, we generally meet once a month via video chat, and we connect. And that's how we can create together and troubleshoot together, because it's going to roll out differently at different campuses. here's our contact information. You're welcome to get in touch with Diana, myself, or to write to our Thriving in Action email address. And now, are there questions? We wanted to make sure to leave plenty of room. I think we've got 15 minutes or 10 minutes for questions if there are any. Happy to take them. Thank you so much.
Hello?
Hi, Carlin.
Dina, I think I was speaking for a good 2 minutes there, and I think my microphone was off.
I didn't hear.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I was just saying thank you, Dina, and thank you so much to Diana as well for sharing the story of your program. And it was really great to hear the story of the impact it had as well on your students. I loved when you were talking about how she was excited to walk into an exam. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we already have a couple of questions rolling in, a lot of questions actually. So let's tackle them one by one. How were the students introduced to the class? How did they find out about it?
Yeah, great. So we now are lucky to have some word of mouth. So sometimes we have students who are sending in their partners or their friends, but really it's through a recruitment email, very simple flyer that just asks, you know, how did last semester go for you? Did you not get the grades you were hoping for? Was it a sort of tougher experience than you'd hoped? And we send a simple flyer to our wonderful allies across campus, and those are program advisors. They're frontline with students, our counseling center, our disability services center, the mentoring office, consent office. So we have, you know, maybe 15 or 20 key stakeholding offices, as well as program advisors, the chief way, and then students self-identify. So we put a very simple registration form. And that we've learned from the wisdom of Windsor. They were the earliest adopters, and they added in their registration form a short question about, you know, why do you want to join? And that was really helpful because, like, you know, a kind of New Year's resolution, you make a New Year's resolution, you sign up for this great program, and then you forget about it. So to mitigate some of the before stepping into the room attrition, we added in that question, students sign a registration form, and away we go.
That's great. Thanks, Dina. Follow up to that question is, how many students are in each cohort?
Yeah, great. So I would say on average, we have anywhere from 15 to 30. It depends on the day and remembering the student population. So lots of things are coming up in their lives, but I would say the room generally has 20 people in it.
Great. Next question. Hi, Dina. I work at a post-secondary career center, and I'm curious about the applicability of TIA programming to career development and career satisfaction with students.
It's such a wonderful question, and our good friends in careers here at Ryerson have been so encouraging and have come to our training institute. You know, I think I mentioned in the presentation virtually all, if not just unequivocally all of the skills that we're teaching are transferable. So we have things like when we teach note-taking, we know from the research on note-taking that being able to discern through like the copious information that comes our way at any given day, that discernment, that ability to judge, decide, extract what's important, which is at the heart of note-taking in a lecture, is the very same skill that you will need and that it's shown that employers are looking for. So it's an easy sell for students. They can see that when we talk about time management and practice it, particularly from a mindful way, you know, we can't just get by in university or college and then think, okay, it's going to get lighter afterwards. Actually, we can learn the skill of really healthful project management or time management right now. So all of those optimism or how, you know, personal model of resilience, Diana gives a great lesson. You know, she takes out the resilience required, say, for swimming and how to keep up an exercise schedule in the face of an injury or a closed pool or meetings that get in the way, that she already has those resilience skills. And through the teaching she offers on personal model of resilience, she extracts those and puts it into a new situation, like how do I navigate conflict with a challenging coworker? So another example of that employability or relatedness, we actually, because this program, this flourishing program is itself flourishing, we were invited into a capstone sociology class last semester, and the capstone class was about job shadowing and learning how to apply for, intern, and really nail a job in the social sciences and humanities. And so we came in and taught Thriving in Action from the angle of job seeking. So these are very, very applicable skills. We have students in their final semester, pre-graduation, talk about in their what went well, how they're applying what we're teaching as they're job searching. Perlin, are you on mute? Perlin?
You know what? I think it's my mic. It's really,
there you go. I hear you.
Thanks for pointing that out. Thanks for that, Dina. The next question is, do you have a first semester orientation program as well? And if so, how well do these two programs coexist?
Yes, so great. You know, we've learned a lot, and in Thriving in Action Training Institutes, we go into more detail. We've tried it in a number of different ways, including first 6 weeks. That is the one place so far that Thriving in Action has not worked wonderfully. Now, we didn't specifically tailor, we didn't radically adapt or modify our material. It didn't work because students didn't have the insight yet about what was going to be demanded of them. Really, this question lands so well for students who have had a failure of some kind, a challenge, a hurdle. So for those students, you know, I gave the example of students who are transferring from, say, college into the university system. Those students loved Thriving in Action the first 6 weeks because they knew what it was going to take. But for students who perhaps are fresh out of high school and there's a lot to acclimate to, we didn't find it landed as well. I'm really curious to try it again sometime. However, one of the beauties or the uniquenesses of Thriving in Action as it stands right now is that it serves students who are often just left on their own those middle years. We've also, just to add, tried it as a year-long. So instead of offering one session a week, starting from the 3rd week of September for 10 or 11 weeks at 2 hours, or more recently 3 hours a week, we tried it as a 1 hour a week for the full year. And of course, I'm sure many of you are saying, oh, you know, Dina and Diana, you should have known, schedules change. And really, we wanted more time in the room, and it didn't work as we carried on to the 2nd semester. So what we know works really well is once a week, either 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever you can be afforded. We did, in fact, try last summer an intensified spring session where we ran it twice a week, and that has its merits. And I would say 50%, I mean, everyone got something out of it. 50% of those students were like, yes, all the way, absolutely, this was so worthwhile. The other 50% was like, this is great, but it's a bit abstract because I'm not in classes right now. I wish I could apply these strategies right now. So we've had, you know, we have other practitioners, other educators who say, whoa, you should be offering it all summer long. We hear that. And right now we would if we weren't working so hard, perhaps on the Thriving in Action online and their research, getting that analysis out, ready for publication. But there's still a question mark for us because it's meant to be applied. It's meant to be experimented with. That's how learning strategies work, and certainly thriving strategies as well. But back to the question of first 6 weeks, I think it can work. We just need to think more about what would really bridge that gap for the hypothetical of like, you haven't taken your first midterm yet. So what's that going to be like? Yeah.
Thanks, Dina. It sounds like Tia has gone through several.
Yeah, we're curious. We're curious to know the ways that it works and the ways that it doesn't. Perlin, are you there? Oh, Perlin, you're back. I can hear.
I'm back. Oh my God. Sorry. Okay. This mic, it looks really good and nice and big, but it actually keeps shorting out on me. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
The next question is, if while attending TS, some troubling psychological information surfaces for a student, how is that handled?
So I'm gonna answer that in two ways. There are two maybe parts or implications of that. So one is if anything arises for the student that isn't public. And so, you know, because of the pre-questionnaire, we have a good sense. And then if something arises, the relationship, like we teach from a stance of benevolence, which isn't to say that all is welcome, but all are welcome. So all people are welcome. We don't invite disclosure in the room, but because of the benevolent and warm relationship with Diana and I, and because we make really clear right from the start of the commitments in the room about, say, not monopolizing conversation, getting in touch with us if you're feeling like you're in crisis, that students do, and they reach out. We also send a weekly email. Hey, noticed you weren't in session today. Sometimes that's where things come up. So if it's disclosure with Diana or I, we very quickly, because now we're kind of a bit more of a recognized entity on campus, we can almost seamlessly get students the more specialized help that they need and more urgent help that they need. In terms of disclosure in session, the really beautiful, and I would perhaps even use the word unique thing about Thriving in Action is there is no room for it publicly. It hasn't happened yet. Remembering too that Diana and I also are able to de-escalate or navigate conversations away. But the reason it doesn't come up is because from the very first moment, we start with what went well. And that frames how the rest of the session is going to go. It isn't about what isn't going well. Students are invited to share what is going well. And then the rest of this session is, to be honest, unapologetically didactic. We have students hungry to learn, and we teach.
Thanks, Dina.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to check my mic's working. Okay, it is.
Yeah, your mic's great.
How do you schedule the program to ensure that all the interested students are able to attend, keeping in mind mature learners, commuter students, etc.?
Yeah, great question. I would say, I mean, even from the question itself, likely impossible. Not all learners are going to be able to do it. We have offered multiple cohorts because of that. Diana and I are creating this and doing the research on the side and creating Thriving in Action online. Plus, Diana's running the Thrive RU initiative and is going and teaching, you know, up to 18 hours, 20 hours a week in various classes. And I'm running the nature-based pedagogy pieces on class. Because of all of those things, we know ourselves and we're morning people. So we offer morning sessions. But that, you know, we know at Windsor what's worked really well is they've offered evening sessions and dinner, and they've had remarkable success there. So I would say it really depends on who the instructors are, who the practitioners are, and that part of the answer to that question, because all students isn't going to be possible the way that it is now. I mean, they'll have class conflicts or work conflicts, is the online. We know that that is going to fill a gap.
Thanks, Dana. So it is, we only have 2 minutes left, so we probably only have time for maybe 2 more questions. One question, really, I'm trying to find like a nice, good one for you. Well, actually, one question is, where do I find more information about when the next training session is going to happen?
Yeah, great. I mean, you can send us an email and we can just sort of keep you on a list, and we can email you. We've just finished some, so we haven't put our heads together. What we can say that's happened the last 2 years is the second week of December is generally when we've run it. It happens at the end of our teaching, at the end of your teaching. And so that's been a really good opportunity. In fact, some practitioners have come in, learned, and launched it in January, because often we start, you know, into the third, or we encourage people to start in the third week of every semester. So even if you wanted to launch it, just say in January, there's enough time. So we found that sweet spot, it's usually been like just the second Monday in December, that's been a really good opportunity. It's just after the sort of exhale of the semester, before people go on holiday, and just enough time if you did in fact want to make use of the curricular pieces in January. So if not before then, certainly there, you can keep an eye out on Thrive RU, or you best is just email us, send us an email that you're interested.
Thanks, Dina. Okay, last question. How long does each TS session last?
Yeah, so it has been historically 2 hours. However, because of the success of the program, we were afforded to do 3 hours. Diana and I are wordy girls, and I've been trained in yoga and restorative yoga recently, and I wanted to bring in even more of the somatic pieces. Diana wanted to bring in more sleep. It's not like a fixed program. It's not ever going to be done. So we just keep adding more and more and more. We hear from students what's particularly on their minds, what they're struggling with. So 2.5 hours is great. 2 hours is totally doable. 3 hours is luxurious. And splitting it up where it's 1 hour Diana or thriving, 1 hour Dina or learning strategy is possible, but isn't ideal because something is a little bit lost when it's not married together. That's where the magic happens.
All right, thank you so much, Tina. And unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions.
No, it's so great. Thank you so much. 100 people spent their lunch hour with us, and that's really touching. Thank you, everybody, so much for your care. Thank you, Perlin. Thank you, CICMH. You've been
Thank you,
so
Dina. It's
encouraging
been
from
really
the start.
amazing. Yeah, it's been really amazing to see how the program has evolved over the last couple of years as well. It's really great. Well, thank you so much for presenting with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our next webinar is going to be on June 25th, when we're talking about addressing mental health and well-being by creating balanced and supportive physical environments on campus. So do check our website for the registration link. And if you have any questions on the web about this presentation, you did see Dina and Diana's email, but of course you're welcome to send me a question as well, and I can connect you to them. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.